Hey guys, this is Carrie. So in this video, we're going to be making a crazy background changer. Just to highlight what we're making here, this is from last year. When you press any key on the keyboard, it changes the background color to a random color, and I think that's pretty cool. It's also going to teach us a couple of new JavaScript features. We've been talking a lot about clicking on stuff with the mouse and having events from that. Here, our event is going to be based on pressing things on the keyboard. Any button we press will cause those changes to occur. And in addition, we're going to look at, instead of playing a sound or changing the text on the web page, the event is actually going to cause the style of the web page to change. So I've got my brand new REPL created, party background. At this point, pause the video and create a new REPL using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So looking at the web page, we're going to need to have a mix of, we're going to need to have an H1 and a paragraph. So down here, and I'm going to put them before the script tag. The reason why they need to go before the script tag is the JavaScript may need these elements to exist in order to manipulate them. If the script tag goes before them, then the JavaScript is loading before the elements load, and the elements don't exist, so the JavaScript can't impact them. Anyway, the JavaScript should be the last line in the body. So the H1 here is background changer according to this, but we're going to make it party backgrounds. The paragraph here is going to be some directions to the user. So you'll probably have to type this in, but I can copy and paste it into a paragraph. And I'm not going to be making use of IDs today, actually, because we only have an H1 and a paragraph. They already are distinct relative to the rest of the HTML document without having a unique specifier. H1 is unique as well. All right, so since we're talking about style today, let's load up this web page. I've got it open here. Usually when we style stuff, we style it in the, not JavaScript, style.css file, and I forgot to change this, okay? So we might do something like H1, and if we want to modify the H1, we have a variety of property value pairs that we can utilize, like font family. And rather than go crazy with the Google fonts, I'm going to use a built-in font, sans serif. And now the sans serif font will be applied to party background. In fact, we can change the color of the text just by using the color property to any of these values. So maybe we can change it to blue-violet. That's a pretty sounding color. All right, cool. And if we wanted to change the background of this, we could just change the background color to something like blue. And we reload it, and we've got that. But that doesn't really work for me, right? Like, blue is good here, but it's like too similar of a color. So what we've seen is that there's actually alternative ways to specify colors outside of this keyword method, and this is going to be really useful today. So rather than specify this color using just the word blue, let's slide around and find a blue that we like. I'm going to shoot for a light blue so that it kind of lets everything stand out. All right, so let's see. I'll refresh it now. And that's like decent. That's cool. So we'll stick with that. Now the way that these colors work here is this one is specified by a keyword, but you don't have the same versatility with the keyword colors as you do with the RGB style colors. So the way the RGB style colors work is if you zoom in really far on your computer, further than I can actually zoom in, because it's actually the screen I have to zoom in on, your computer is actually built out of tiny little squares called pixels. And each pixel actually has 3 different lights inside of it. Each pixel has a red light, that's why it's R, a green light, and a blue light. And by taking these lights, we can actually tell that pixel how bright the red light should be. It should be brightness 206. The green light should be brightness 206, same brightness for the green. And the blue light, brightness 255, because this is mostly blue, I guess. the blue brightness is significantly higher than the other two. So this sets the brightness of each of those little lights actually inside of your computer screen. And that's like how the hardware works. But the best analogy for this maybe is kind of thinking back to elementary school. You know, to make to make orange, you might mix red and yellow. You can basically, with your computer, instead of red, yellow, and blue, your computer will take red, green, and blue and mix them to make any color. All right, so that's how computers make colors. And that's going to be really useful for today. So let's say that thinking about the party mode here, the party mode really isn't about this color, it's about the background color. So we might think, what element do we need to select on the page to change the background of the whole page? And so going over to the HTML, that's going to be the body element. The body refers to everything that's on the window of the web page. So to style that here, instead of selecting the H1, we're going to select the body tag element. So body, background. And one thing that's interesting here is if you turn all of these to 0, then it basically means all of the lights are off. Red, green, and blue lights have 0 brightness. So let's see how this looks. Completely black because all of the lights are off. It's weird here, but the maximum brightness that we can have for each of them is actually 255. And that seems like a bizarre choice of number. Like, why wouldn't they choose something like 666 or 100 or 1,000, a number that's kind of nice? But 255 is chosen for a reason that we'll discuss later in the year, but this is the maximum brightness. And if we turn all of their brightness to the maximum brightness, maximum red, maximum green, maximum blue, our eyes actually see that as white because the light is so bright and all in equal components. So if we want to make, let's say, maybe a purple background to start, I might think, okay, well, I'll turn off the green lights and I'll leave the red and the blue lights. And we get like kind of this bright pink background, which is promising. We've got the right ratio. We want a mix of red and blue, but to make purple, maybe we need less red and less blue, like a darker red and a darker blue. And so there we go, we've got purple, but I actually like the way the bright one looks, so I'm gonna go back to 255. There we go, okay, cool. So we've got this. Now, all of this was sort of the lead-in to focusing on the JavaScript part. So for the JavaScript part, what we really want to do here is, instead of statically, when we say static, it means unchangingly. Instead of unchangingly setting these colors, we want to dynamically change these colors so that when something happens, when we interact with the page, the colors change. And interaction should make you think not of CSS, but of JavaScript. So the same way that in the CSS we selected these elements so that we could alter them, we want to select these elements here. So select the elements we're going to interact with. And in order to select these, you can use the cheat sheet method for selecting stuff. We selected stuff in the soundboard project, those images, so that we can make them clickable. So I'm going to copy and paste one. The first thing we may want to interact with here is maybe we want to interact with the h1 element. So maybe I'll say let h1 equal. And because it's the only h1 element on the page, rather than use an ID for that, I'm just going to say select it using its tag type, h1. We don't need a hashtag here because this isn't an ID. This is the equivalent of styling by using the element type instead of styling by using the ID. I'm going to type the next one in by hand. I also want to change the background of the body, so we need to select the body element. So we're going to go onto the document, which is the HTML document. We're going to select, and that's why we say query selector, and then the selector for the body is just going to be the body tag. And if you highlight over this, I think, oh no, it doesn't show you here, okay. But basically you're selecting the body element from the page, which is this whole highlighted portion, which refers to this whole background. So that's the equivalent of this kind of feature right here. All right, cool. So we are actually making great progress. The only thing that remains to do now is to create the event that changes the background color. So let's coordinate events. And whenever we think about stuff happening on a page, interacting with the web page, clicking on it, that's an event. Pressing a button on the keyboard, that's an event. Loading the page, that's an event. Printing the page is an event. And all of these events, all of these interactions utilize the same type of code structure as our soundboard clicking event. So we're going to grab our event listener code here, making sure to get all 4 lines of it all the way down to this right here. So now when we think about the event that we want to set up, before it was an image that when we clicked on that image, it did something. It's a little strange here, but the thing that listens for key presses on a web page, it's not really a part of the web page that listens for key presses. It's actually the whole window. So whenever we're going to use some interaction with the keyboard, it's going to be the window that's listening. And you'll notice that window wasn't a variable that we had to define. JavaScript automatically recognizes the window as an element that we can interact with. So our window is going to be listening to an event. And it's not going to be listening to a click event. That would mean clicking on the window. In fact, we actually can look up on a list of events here. So I just Googled, I'll show you. I Googled JavaScript Events. And Mozilla is a really great resource. They're the company that makes Firefox, so I clicked this one. And here's all of the events that Windows or anything could listen to. It could listen for an error. It could listen for a load event. We actually use that with loading all of our sounds. It could listen for all of these things. It's kind of overwhelming, actually. Before printing, it could do something to the web page. If we resize the page, maybe that's an event that we want to listen to. But here we go. Keyboard events are where we really want to focus, and there's 3 of them. One of them is pressing any key down. The other is continuously fired. So this event will continuously trigger if we're holding down a key. You may want to use that one. I'm not going to. And this one is the key up event. So if you release a key, if you take your finger off of a key, what will happen? I'm going to listen for a key down event because I want to focus on when we press the buttons. So the event type here is a key down event. So you can imagine that in the future, if you wanted to use a different event, you might copy and paste this code, figure out which element is being interacted with, and then scroll through the entire list of these events here and find the event that you need. All right, so we'll continue working with new events, but we want the key down event. So basically, when we press the key down, we want to change the background color. So I'm just going to do that real quick. The way that we do it is we say the background is the body element. So take the body element, go into its list of style properties, and this is similar to the CSS. You can choose any CSS property here. The style that we want to change here is going to be the background color, which when we write it as CSS is just the word background. And then what we want to do is we want to set that equal to some new value. Maybe I'll just make it red to start. So now if we reload this page and we press any key, the key down event has been triggered. So the procedure that runs is the body.style.background becomes red. Maybe it will also be interesting to change the H1's text color here. So what we can say is go into the H1 element, make the style of that. Okay, and what style do we use for text color? We use just color for text color. So make the color of that equal to, what color would look good there? Green. All right, cool. So now when we press a button on the keyboard, not only does the background turn red, the text color of the H1 turns green. That's pretty cool. You can also work with things like sizes and stuff like that. So why don't we take our H1 go into its CSS styling, and I think it's font size. And you'll notice the autocompletes here are really helpful. We can make the font size equal to, I don't know, something like 40 pixels when we press that button on any button on the keyboard. Oops, I don't need to save the website. We'll reload this. And now when we press any key on the keyboard, it changes the size there. Let me make that more dramatic here. Let me make that 80 pixels. Refresh it. Cool, so that works. And you can change any CSS property using this structure. So select the element, go into its style list, and then change the property. And let's see. I actually put this in the cheat sheet here. So if you'd rather copy and paste, you can use that as well. To change an element style, you do this. But I like to type it out because I think it makes things a little bit clearer. All right, so I'll leave that for now. To make the party background though, we don't want to just always change it to red. We want to change it to a random color. So we need to have the ability to do that. Now JavaScript is actually really good at making certain kinds of random numbers. So let me show you that right here. I'm loading up a little JavaScript console, which you can get to by doing View, Developer Tools, JavaScript Console. And I'm just going to type in some JavaScript here. So when you type in math.random in JavaScript, this actually generates a random number. But the problem is that all of them are random decimals between 0 and 1. And that's not going to be useful for specifying a color where the values should be between 0 and 255. So what I did, and this is sort of a preview for the future of what you're going to be doing, is I took the built-in random function from JavaScript and I elaborated on it a little bit. I created a more complex random function here, which will allow us to make any random number. So let me copy and paste that here. This function is not built into JavaScript. This is a function that I defined. And very soon, in one of the future units, you're going to be defining your own JavaScript functions so that you can take the built-in tools of JavaScript and do more complicated things. So here we go. I'm putting this at the very top of my page here because I want to be able to access this random number function anywhere here in my code. So this function is given a name. It's the generate random function. I have to tell it the minimum random number possible and the maximum random number possible inside of the parentheses. And then here's the procedure that actually creates the random number. So let me show you this in action here. This is basically like teaching JavaScript how to do this. It doesn't actually generate a random number yet. It is here, what you have to do is you have to do generate random, the function name, and then you can pick your numbers here. So the minimum number here, maybe let's do, I don't know, 10 to 20. And now it will actually run that generate random function and create some random numbers. All right. So I'm spending a lot of time doing this, trying to build up to an understanding of things. So we've got generate random number function, and we need to actually use it. So the time when we want to use it is we want to use it when we press a keydown thing. So we'll go into the keydown procedure, and here what we're going to do is let's generate a red amount. And the red amount is going to be a random number, so we'll do generate random from 0 to 255. In order to create a complete color, let's also generate a blue amount. So we'll generate a random number from 0 to 255 for the blue amount. Oh, sorry, it's RGB, so I'll do a green amount. Let green equal generate random 0 to 255 for the green amount. And every time I type generate random here, it's actually looking up here and using this function that we copied and pasted and created in JavaScript. And now what we need to do is we need to put these red, green, and blue amounts together to change the body's background. So here, instead of making it red, let's just go over to the CSS. The way it looks is to set it, you have to do RGB number, number, number. And this is a little bit kind of gross to program in here, but we'll have to do RGB, because we want to set the body style background to RGB, parenthesis, and then kind of like those Mad Libs projects that we did, we have to add in the red amount. Then we have to put a comma, because in the structure of the RGB color here, it's number, comma, number, comma, number. So then we add in the green amount, and let me just make this screen a little bit bigger here. We add in a comma. We add in the blue amount. No more commas here because blue is the last one. We add in the last parenthesis here. And now we've created our RGB string, which should be RGB something, comma, something, comma, something, parenthesis. All right, cool. I don't need to save the web page. I keep pressing Command S. Let's refresh this web page. And now when we press any button, you'll notice that the background changes to a different random number, a random color. And the reason why that's working is every time we press the key down, it generates 3 random numbers and then changes these. So I'm going to delete these H1 styles. I don't really love those. It kind of throws off my party mode here. So let's see how this looks instead. So now every time we press a button, it will do that. I'm going to get rid of the JavaScript console by pressing that X. And whoa, party mode, cool, cool, cool. So I think it could be really interesting if you wanted to continue working on this to add some sound effects in whenever you press a key down. It will play a new sound. Maybe you'll put on Party Rock by LMFAO or something like that. But this is how we can create a key down event that uses random numbers to alter the style of an element on the page. And all 3 of those things are new, and all 3 are useful. See you guys next class.